Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is your Loveraj Grewal, international student coach and international education expert, helping you, the students who are studying in Canada or wish to study in Canada, with every challenge that you may face over there. Today, we have a great topic for you guys, which is job tips for you, the international students. And we have an expert in the room today with us, Liz Manzato from Scarborough, Canada. Welcome, Liz. Welcome to the room. And please tell us something about yourself.
Hi, Loveraj. Hi, everyone that's watching. Thank you so much for having me here today. As I was introduced, my name is Liz, and I'm an employment advisor at Centennial College, close to Toronto, Ontario in Canada. And basically what I do for my job is I'm a job search expert. So I support both our students and graduates in anything job search related, whether that's prepping resumes, getting ready for mock interviews, networking, or anything they need. So thank you so much for having me here today to share some of my tips.
That's great. We are very excited, not just me, I'm sure our listeners, international students, they must be excited to get the tips straight from the employment advisor, the expert in this regard, in this field. So let's start with the very first thing, the very first question. What is the biggest tip that you have for our international students in regards to job search?
Yeah, so my first tip, and this is where I start in all my conversations with students, is I ask them what they're doing to get started networking, right? Networking is so important for finding a job. And, you've probably heard it before. It's not about, what you do. It's about who you know, right? And that's so important. I mean, of course, our skills are equally as important when we're going to apply for a position. But nowadays in a job market where communication skills and how well we work with other people are so important. Our first step to kind of prove those skills is through networking. Networking is such a big part of the job search process nowadays.
These international students, they're newbies, and it's hard for us sometimes to make connects, right? And a lot of challenges kicks in, right? That we may not belong there and what we must do. So if you can touch base on what students can do differently, what are the biggest points, tips that you have for students to network with people then over there, with employers and companies?
So one of the biggest questions I get once I tell people about how important networking is yes, they're going to say, okay, I know that, but how do I do it? And where do I go from here now that I know that this is important? And so honestly, where I always tell them is first start working on your communication skills, taking every opportunity you can to keep building those communication skills, talking to people, whether that's people already in your network, like peers or colleagues that you're already working with, family members, friends, or just attending different events. So going to webinars where you have a chance to connect with other people, attending virtual job fairs, because I know face-to-face connections aren't always possible nowadays, or in-person connections, but there's tons of virtual events still happening. So those are great ways to kind of engage with your network and to really start talking to others. And then just getting creative about who you connect with. Like one of my best examples actually is an international student that I was working with, and he just got a job in February, and he's been working in that position for a couple months now. And what he actually did is he started looking at companies he was interested on LinkedIn, and he was a Brazilian student, and he actually found Brazilian contacts that worked at the company. And so he already had a connection with these people because they both had the same cultural background. And that person at that company was much more willing to support him because he had this connection with them. So that's another really great tip about networking is finding a connection with people before you network, right? The others are going to be much more likely to help you and much more eager to support you if they know that there's a connection between the two of you already. So before we move on to the next point, I actually just wanted to add in there a misconception that happens a lot when it comes to networking is a lot of people think that networking is to get a job, but we have to actually approach networking a different way. So instead of approaching it, is this contact going to be offering me a job, or are they going to have a job lead for me in the future? We instead want to approach it as, what can I learn from them? So you can definitely start asking them more about, if they work for a company that you're interested in, asking them about, how to prepare your resume, how can I make myself stand out to the employers a little bit better, because they'll have a lot more knowledge around that. But one mistake a lot of job seekers make is they'll go into that networking meeting or go into a networking situation, say, do you have jobs available, or do you know about jobs that are available? And yeah, we really got to take that connotation away from networking and instead look at it as an opportunity for relationship building, right? And it's not always necessarily a hiring manager that you're going to be networking with, but it might be just like someone like Loveraj, who's alumni and knows what it's like to be a new grad and can give you some great tips on how to help your job search efforts. Or someone who works in your industry and has had a very successful career, and you just want to find out more about how to have a similar successful career as well. So that's another great tip for networking, is not always to approach it, thinking, can this person get me a job? But instead, what can I learn from them?
Right? They're not ready to take that uncomfortable action as international students because they may not know how to take it, or they still have that imposter syndrome that I'm maybe not, I don't belong here, I'm maybe not good enough. So have you seen those challenges with your students? If yes, then what worked out for them? What they did differently?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And informational. Sorry, you call them casual interviews. We refer to them as informational interviews. So if you ever hear me using that transferably, that's what we mean, is those casual interviews that you would set up with someone in the industry. But yeah, I definitely see that. I see a lot of challenges, especially my international students saying that they feel like they're at a disadvantage because not only is English not their first language, but they also don't already have a network to begin with in Canada, where a lot of my domestic students, they already have friends, they've already had part-time jobs in Canada. So yeah, I think what it really comes down to in those cases is, what I always recommend is start networking with who you feel most comfortable with. So if that means, coming and having a casual conversation with your career services department, like myself, or connecting with someone like an alumni, for example, where you know that the goal isn't necessarily for them to hire you. And again, that's where we take some of that pressure away, right? Is that you have to approach these conversations as, I'm here to learn and I'm here to get advice. And so those people who are on the other end of the conversation, they're not sitting here thinking, is this going to be someone I want to hire? That's not the goal of the meeting. It's instead, how can I help them more? And that's, I think, reframing the way we approach those meetings is really important. Another thing I recommend is, being careful with the way that you network, right? I mean, we have to find that connection with the person first. And I think you were saying, you don't want to just send a message to anyone who pops up on your radar, because you need to have a goal in that conversation. So like I was saying before, depending on what your goals are, maybe you want to learn more about a particular job that you're interested in going into, or maybe you just want to learn more about job search in general. That's going to change who you decide to network with. So for example, you might start with connecting with the career services department and talking to an employment advisor, because they're going to have more job search specific advice for you. But if you're looking for more industry specific advice, then, maybe searching within the industry, within LinkedIn profiles, company profiles, and things like that to find those contacts. So also having a more targeted network when you're networking as well. But yeah, specifically for those international students, my best advice is take every opportunity you can. If you notice that there's a company that's, hosting an information session where you can go and learn from the hiring managers, or if you notice that your alumni association at your college is having an event where you can connect with the alumni there, take advantage of that and really start with the people who, maybe there's less pressure on you for networking, and it's not so much, a hiring manager that you're really worried about your, those communication skills to begin with. And as you start to get more comfortable, you can then grow who you're networking with. Start with your small network and then start to expand as you have more of those professional conversations and build your confidence.
Then again, even when you network with people, Liz, there's one issue that students face. Big challenge for international students. They don't know how to build their resume. So what do you have? What tips do you have for resume building for the students?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's ultimately what networking will help us with in the end is, my biggest tip when it comes to resumes is that you want to customize those resumes, right? Quality versus quantity, right? It's better to have 5 excellent resumes submitted rather than 20 kind of okay resumes submitted, right? So I always talk about that is that, you don't want to just take one resume and submit it to every single job. You really want to customize it to the needs of the employer and the needs of the company and the needs of the job description. And so networking can really help us with that, right? So as I was mentioning, if there's one company that you want to work for, if there's a handful of companies that you're really interested in, try networking with people within those companies, either people in the jobs you're targeting, or with people who are in the HR department, management, that type of thing, and see what type of advice they can give you. And again, we're not approaching it like, hey, will you hire me? But when we reach out and when we say, I'd love some advice to, help increase my chances of getting hired with your company, that does a couple things. One, it opens up the opportunity to get some advice and help improve your documents or, the way you market yourself to the company. But two, it kind of puts your name in the employer's ear, and it just helps. It helps increase your chances that much more. So when that employer, gets that pile of resumes and they're looking through, they're going to recognize your name a little bit more because you've made these extra efforts to reach out to them and make that connection and to customize your documents a little bit more. So yeah, really customizing your documents. The resume, when we're customizing, that's more about the skills that we're highlighting, right? So, if we know that a job that we're applying for, it's not a management position, we're not really going to be leading a team, we don't want to be highlighting leadership skills on the resume because we know that's not a key aspect of the job. But if we notice in this job description or in this company, teamwork is extremely important and being able to collaborate with others, then that's what you want to start focusing on within your resume. And so those are the changes that you can make from here and there. For the cover letter, it's a little bit easier to customize because on the cover letter, we usually format that and actually address it to a specific person. So again, this is another way that networking can come into play is that if you've done your research, maybe through LinkedIn and, looked at the company contacts and chatted with a few contacts, you can use those names to either address your cover letter or to mention in your cover letter that you were referred to the job by, this contact that you've been connected with. And I think that was something Loveraj was mentioning earlier, right? Is being able to use those referrals in the future as well. But I will, before we move on, mention that, we have to build that relationship before we're using someone as a referral, right? I mean, sending one message and asking for their support and having a couple email exchanges doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to, recommend you for a job. So it's really about, that back and forth relationship, not just about asking something of that person, but also, including them in that networking aspect as well. A resume is only your relevant information. So a CV is actually your entire work history from start to finish, whereas the resume is actually limited. So the resume should only be about 2 pages for most industries. And so in order for us to do that, if you are someone who has a long work history from back home, you would want to decide, okay, what information is most important on this resume. Now, when we're making that decision, again, one of the biggest questions I get from international students is, should I even bother putting my international experience on there? And, it makes me scream every time because I'm like, yes, of course, it's so important. You gain skills from those work experiences, so they definitely should be on your resume. Again, yes, of course, Canadian employers, they're always going to really value the fact that you have Canadian experience. But if you're going into the financial industry in Canada and you don't show them that you have experience in the financial industry from back home, then they're going to think you're a fresh grad with no work experience whatsoever. And so that's something that's really important, is making sure you are still highlighting your international experience. But again, just being careful in the way that we highlight it, right? So if we're going into, a sales position in the future, maybe we're not going to focus on our job within IT, for example. But we really have to think about the transferable skills and when we say transferable skills, those are skills that, go from one job to the next. They're not just skills you need in one particular position. So things like communication skills, things like customer service, organization, those types of things. When you're deciding what to put on your resume as well, so I mean, the basics, of course, are your education and your experience. But if you're, say, a new grad who doesn't have a lot of work experience, you have to think about the other experiences you're able to show the employer. So, for example, if maybe you're a student who's going into the you're applying for automotive jobs, and you've never worked in a field before, but you actually helped a lot of your family members repair their vehicles, and you've done a lot of work on vehicles, then maybe you want to put a little section that talks about your personal accomplishments and highlight some of that work you've done on your own, right? I see this a lot with, I work with early childhood educators. So they're learning to work with preschool age children, and most of them are mothers who have children, right? And so those are transferable skills. They obviously know how to take care of toddlers because they were mothers themselves, but it's not a paid position. So sometimes we can figure out how to incorporate those skills onto the resume as well. Volunteer experiences, projects that you did within your education. You want to think about all the ways that you can really highlight your skills to the employer, and brag about your skills, right? That's something I hear a lot is, a lot of my international students say, am I really supposed to be bragging this much? I'm like, yeah, it's your chance to sell yourself. It's your chance to show the employer that you're the best option for them. So you really have to brag about yourself and highlight those important skills.
Right. So any other special tip, I would say a golden tip for our international students, or immigrants, like I said, for job search. Please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just like reflecting on the best ways to network and specifically stand out to the companies, right? I was mentioning that, when we get our resumes in that pile, when our resumes in that pile in the employer's hands, we want our name to stand out. And so think about ways that you can do that for the company. A big way is following them on social media, staying up to date with what's going on. That's also the best way to hear about new job alerts, new initiatives that the company's working on as well. Attending company events, things like that, and then networking with people in the company, as we've mentioned. And then I actually just want to give a little bit of an example of how networking can kind of pay off and how it can happen in the most rare situations. And this actually just happened to me on Monday. I brought my car in to get the tires switched from summer to winter, or winter to summer tires. And as I was checking out at the cash register, I was chatting with the guy at the register and mentioning that my past mechanic shop had closed down, and he was mentioning how slow the job market was nowadays. And then sure enough, I started talking about how I work with a lot of automotive students and that it's been a struggle with them and that their industry slowing down. And long story short, he ended up introducing me to his placement student that was working in his co-op student that was working in the shop. And we ended up chatting. He ended up asking me some advice about job search. And by the end of it, this is the first time I'd ever been to that mechanic shop. But by the end of it, he's like, thank you so much, Liz, for your help. And now I didn't get his name, unfortunately. I should have done that. Bad networking. But now me and the shop mechanic now have this relationship, right? And he actually feels comfortable asking me those questions. And, if I was in a situation where I was job searching, maybe he could have recommended, actually, my buddy just opened up a shop and, there's some positions there. So I think that's just a really good example of how networking can really happen at any time, any place, if you're open to those connections and communicating with others.
All right, Liz. Amazing tips, great tips. And just one last thing, I would like to ask you, when do you suggest or recommend the international students to, at what stage basically of their overall journey as an international student, they should start working on these points, they should start networking to help them get jobs down the road?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Honestly, yesterday, any stage at their job search journey, start as soon as possible, right? Because, as I've said, the more connections you make, the more chances, the more opportunities you're going to have, the more leads you're going to get. So it's never too late to start networking. And I mean, especially now when, during the pandemic, when so much of the world is virtual, you have those resources. You have LinkedIn at your fingertips. You have 10,000 coffees at your fingertips. Why not engage with those and start really using those tools? Looking at those virtual events, virtual webinars. If you're an international student who hasn't come to Canada yet, it's now's a better time than any to start looking at those things and preparing yourself for when you do get here. And I mean, honestly, one of the best resources you have is already at your fingertips right now, these videos, and, you know, and Loveraj himself as an international advisor and supporting students through that. You have to look at, you know, your existing contacts and network to start. And you've got an excellent resource right here at your fingertips already. So engaging with those is the best way to get started.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again. And it was a pleasure hosting you as our special guest today. And some great tips you pointed out, planned for the international students, for job tips, job search tips. And again, on behalf of all our international student community, we really thank you for all the professional, amazing tips that you have for our students. And I'm sure students are going to get a great value out of this video and these tips. Thank you very much. I believe that's the end of the session for today. And it was a pleasure hosting you, pleasure to see your lovely face, and pleasure listening to you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Loveraj. Thank you, everyone, for listening.